me personally because, we all have aging parents, right? I had a mom just last week. We celebrated 9 years since her passing. And, in those last years of her life, times were very different than what they were growing up because it was more or less us taking care of her rather than her taking care of us. And so I spent a lot of time, working with her, helping her to get connected to different things that she needed as she began to age. We moved her out of our house of 30 years and then into a condo that my brother bought for her. And she stayed in that for 10 years. And then she had started having some health issues. She had a heart attack and she developed congestive heart failure. She had back surgery that made her a bit incapacitated. And it was after that time that she really needed more care, and but she was still able to live independent. And so what did that mean for us? And I have 8 brothers and sisters, so it was, how do we deal with mom and how do we take care of her needs and what do we do to make certain that she's cared for? So, in our environment, my sister stepped up and made an extension on her house so that she could move in with her. And then my sister started taking care of her. Well, after a year of taking care of my mother, she realized that I just can't do this. It's just a lot. It was overwhelming. It was taking her to appointments and ensuring that she was eating healthy and doing all the things that needed to sustain her as an elderly senior. And so my sister and I began to look at where mom could live in independent living. And so then we found her an independent living apartment that she could live in, and it was great because she had a 1-bedroom apartment with a kitchen, and her neighbors were all there. One of her neighbors was her brother and his wife, and they had a community, a sense of community, and they took care of each other and looked out for each other. And then, she continued to decline in her health, and we had to take the next step to put her into assisted living, and then ultimately hospice, and she passed. So, we all have this coming about in our own personal lives about what's happening to our parents. And so what we face at St. Mary's is the same scenario. We have seniors who are living in our communities. We are independent living facilities. We are a real estate developer building low-income housing for seniors. And the beauty of what happened in my mom's life is that she had a job for 30 years, that she paid into a pension. She had pension payments coming to her every month, plus Social Security and other things. So she could afford to live in independent living and make these moves that we talked about. But what you'll find in our current society is that there's a significant number of seniors who worked all their lives who aren't able to take care of themselves in terms of retirement because they put all their money while they worked as working class people, bricklayers, secretaries, teachers, all those, and they put their bulk of their money into the house that they owned. And in particular, we're talking about some of the folks that live in East Dayton, some of the people who live in North Dayton, some of the people who live in West Dayton. So there are parts and pockets of our community where people are just the working class people who just, all they did was pay their monthly bills every month. They have bought a house and they continue to live with the intent of selling their house when they retired and living off of their revenue off of the sale of their house. Well, as you know, we have had a big housing market collapse in the early 2000s. And so we are still in recovery of that, and most of those houses have gone underwater. And those folks who were going to rely on that as their sole retirement don't have it anymore. So they are depending only on Social Security to live on. And for most folks, if they had been earning $50,000 a year and now they have to live on Social Security, in some cases that income drops as low as $15,000 a year to live on. And that's what we see at St. Mary's. Our housing developments are considered low income, and rents are based on the income levels of the residents. And for most of our residents, the average income is $14,900 for income. We have 30% of our residents live on less than $10,000 a year. So if you can imagine going from having a regular income to living in a level of poverty that is unsustainable, and you're a senior, so you can't go back to work, how do you manage to get by? And in my mom family's case, I have all my siblings, and we all kind of took care of mom and checked on her, and she had a pension. But most of the folks that we deal with don't have family, or their family are part of the problem, because they see mom's Social Security check or dad's Social Security check come in, and they stop in and say, hey, can you help me out with groceries? Can you help me out here? Can you help me out there? I'm about to be evicted. Can you pay my rent, Mom? These are situations that are very, very real amongst our residents. So what we began to recognize in providing housing is that some of the folks that live in our buildings can't sustain that housing without getting some kind of assistance, some kind of help. So in 2014, St. Mary's Development Corporation decided to add a program of resident services, and that's what I'm here to tell you about. Our resident services program is we have 5 staff members who work within our buildings. We have 800 units of housing that we manage. Some of you are may be familiar with our properties. We have Huffman Place, Twin Towers, Hoover Avenue, or Hoover Place, and Hoover Cottages, Lions 1, and Lions 2, which is out at the base, out at Wright Pat, right across from the hospital out at Wright Pat. And then also Wright Place out in Xenia. And we're about to break ground on 2 new properties. One in Carriage Trails up in Huber Heights. It's Carriage Trails 2. It's actually a second phase of a first phase that we developed a few years back. And then a 55-unit building in Riverside. So we are constantly adding new property opportunities, but we also kind of cycle through our properties. Some of our properties, once they reach a certain age, we do sell them and move on and build other properties. So from a real estate perspective, we are very thoughtful about how we manage our properties to make certain that they're doing well, and when we sell them, we make certain they get sold to a like-minded organization. Typically somewhere, one of our partner agencies is National Church Residencies out of Columbus. They are a Christian-based organization like ourselves who do and care for seniors the same way that we do, but they're a nationally known company, so they can handle the absorption of a building that's a lot older and maintain and continue repairs on them. But in our case, we are constantly in an evolution of building new properties, but the resident services is what helps our seniors stay in those properties. Because what we know just from our own experiences and statistics wise is that a senior, if they can live independent, they live longer, healthier, happier lives. And we also know that we can save taxpayers significant dollars in providing independent living for seniors that can keep on their own. Because if a senior can't maintain their own housing and are forced into nursing care facilities, from a Medicare standpoint, in Medicaid standpoint, it costs taxpayers close to $4,200 a month per resident that gets placed in nursing care. So, and especially if they're capable of living independently, we certainly don't want them living in a nursing care facility. And so we want to do everything we can to help that senior stay independent and age in place. So the way that we do that through our resident services program is our coordinators are housed in those various properties that we have, and in some cases they take on more properties than one. On average, one of our resident service coordinators has 130 residents that they work with. Now that's a pretty tough odds, 1 to 130 residents, that's a lot. So our goal is to raise support for our mission so that we can lower that ratio of resident to coordinator. But what we see happening is that service coordinator will meet with a resident and say, what can I do to help you get connected to services? Because we do not provide direct service. We work with 127 other area agencies and connect those seniors to existing programs that are already in place, people who are experts in their field, so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just simply help connect those seniors to those programs. And a good example is, I'll tell you a quick story about one of our residents. We do provide service coordination in the Biltmore Towers, downtown Dayton. And you may or may not be familiar with that hotel, former hotel. The Biltmore Hotel is now a senior housing property owned by a private company. They hired our resident service coordinators to provide service coordination in their building. That's part of a HUD program, so we agreed to do this as a 2-year project. And so this resident on the front of this newsletter, his name is Richard Strange. I'm going to tell you quickly about his story so that you kind of have an idea of what a coordinator will do to jump through hoops to help a senior get connected to the services that they need. So Richard had been living in the Biltmore for some time. We didn't know him. And that's the point I really want to emphasize, is that our residents are independent living. So we don't go knocking on people's doors and saying, can we help you, can we help you? We make certain that they know we are in the buildings, that we're there to help, but we don't, it is people living on their own. In fact, we have some properties where the seniors have told us, I don't need your help. Don't bother me, because I'm busy, my life is busy, and I'm independent, which is a good thing. We want that of them to be that way. So, in any case, Richard had been surviving pretty much on his own. What we didn't know is that he didn't have any source of income, and he had been selling his plasma to pay his rent. That was how he was paying for rent. And he had gotten sick. You've heard this story, right? He had gotten sick with a cold, a really bad cold, and he couldn't give plasma that month. And so he was very nervous. He's in his 70s. He was very nervous about whether he would be evicted because he wasn't going to be able to make his rent because he had been sick. So he out of his own volition came and sought out the help of our service coordinator and said, I don't know if you can help me, but here's my situation. And she said, well, you really should have come to me sooner. Let's figure out what's going on, why you don't have any income. So it turns out he lost his wife 5 years before, and he had been pretty transient since the loss of his wife. He was very upset. He had been married to her for a long time, and he got just kind of lost, missing his wife and moving around. And in the course of moving around, he lost his personal papers. He had no form of identification. So our service coordinator said, well, the first we need to do is figure out what your identification situation is. And it turned out he immigrated to the United States in the 60s from South Korea. He became a citizen. He joined our military and was in the military for several years. He retired from the military and then joined a private corporation and worked in a company for quite some time. And then his wife, he retired and his wife passed away, and all of these series of just things kept happening to him where he just kind of got lost. And so we helped him by contacting his former employer and saying, well, would you by chance have a copy of any Social Security or any information we can have? And they did have a copy of his Korean birth certificate on file, which is crazy because I don't know any employer that has a copy of a birth certificate on file, not much less a Korean one in Korean, but they did. And with the help of the employer and a translator, they were able to translate the document and get all of the Social Security information, and then they were able to get his Social Security benefits underway. After that, she contacted the VA and was able to get him set up for VA benefits. So now Richard has close to $2,200 a month coming in between his benefits programs. And he did not know he had that. So isn't that amazing? I mean, and he was. It took 4 months to process all of that. Okay, so if you can imagine a 70-year-old person trying to deal with all of the social service agencies, dealing with all of these things to be able to make this happen, it just was overwhelming to him as a senior, as a widower, and all of those other things. So consequently, he is so grateful for what's happened to him that he now buys bus tokens. He pays it forward. He buys bus tokens for everybody in the building with the money that he has. So I think that story is a classic example of the work that our service coordinators do. Not only did we help him get connected to the benefits that he needed, I saw him the day that he found out he was getting his Social Security benefits, and I said to him, oh my gosh, Richard, what are you going to do now that you have all this money coming in? Because he's been living off of plasma sales. And he said, I'm going to buy some clothes. I haven't bought clothes in a long time. So, just the simple things that we take for granted, many of our seniors are challenged with. And especially if they're living on such meager incomes. If they're making decisions about how do I pay for this medication over eating that month, that can be serious. So our service coordinators work with Meals on Wheels, we work with transportation services, we work with utility programs that help get discounts for them, we work with Medicare, Medicaid, CareSource, Buckeye, Molina, all of those programs that are available for seniors to get them connected to services that help to raise their disposable income so that they don't have to make really poor decisions. This program that we do, this resident services program, is solely funded by donations and foundational grants. We have not gotten to the place yet where we are able to bill that service. We hope and see in the foreseeable future, within the next 5 years, that most of what we provide in terms of coordination, service coordination to the residents will become a billable option in terms of healthcare. And the reason that we see that, and you may begin to connect the dots. The reason Ben Carson, who is a doctor who just got assigned as head of HUD, there is a direct correlation between housing and healthcare. And so if we can maintain housing and keep people healthy, to keep them in place, there's a cost savings to all of us. So we also see that direct correlation, and so our job is to make certain that we connect people to all of those services that can get the job done and keep them in their houses. So most of our properties are the rent is based on income. It is independent living, they're apartments. Some are cottages, some are what we call cottages, but they look like condos to me. I mean, they're really quite nice. The ones that we're building in Huber Heights are just going to be, they're already fabulous. We have one division already done. The second subdivision is going in this coming year, and we are just really excited about that style of housing. So all of our housing is built on tax credits. We work with the government on the federal tax credit program. Our funding is done by, in terms of the real estate side, we apply for tax credit funding through the county and the state and the federal government. It actually starts at the federal level, it trickles down into the states and then into the counties, and those tax credits are awarded based on projects. We just applied for 4 new projects for next year. 2 of them are in Toledo, one is in Piqua, and one is hopefully a second building at the VA, which we're really hopeful that works out. The VA property is our crown and jewel property because it's, first of all, it's a beautiful, beautiful facility if you ever get a chance to go see it. The residents at Lions 2 are so proud of their building. They take care of it. Many of them are veterans. When we built the building, the laws under housing wouldn't allow us to discriminate in terms of veterans. We worked with Congressman Mike Turner, and we were able to get that law changed. So now that property and this new property, we hope, does have a veteran preference. So we do still have some non-veterans living in that property on the VA, but they are also, as people move out, people coming in veterans have preference to getting that apartment over a non-veteran. So we are really excited about these four projects that we are involved in. As a real estate developer, we've built properties as far west as Iowa and Pennsylvania and other parts of the country because we partner often with private developers like Miller Valentine, Obers, and the like, because they often need our nonprofit relationship in order to do the tax credit projects. So we work in tandem a lot with the private developers, but our resident services program and the funding for resident services stays right here in the Miami Valley. It focuses on those residents that we serve right here. So the funds that we raise stay right here and serve those seniors. And so we the way this quickly how the tax credit program works, we get awarded a certain amount of tax credit dollars. Like you may have read that we were awarded $11 million in tax credits last year to build these projects in Huber and the one in Riverside. Well, we don't actually get $11 million from the federal government. We get credit that we then sell to private investors. The capital that we raise off of the sale of that tax credit is used to build properties, and by doing it that way, we can keep our rents very, very low. And so the investors are the people who actually own our properties. We manage them, and so we don't take claim that we own them. The private investors actually own the buildings. We manage them. So the tax credit investor, what does he get? He gets the tax credit along with the nonprofit tax credit as well, and then he also gets the depreciation value on the property over the life of the investment, which is typically a 15 or 30-year strategy. So there's a couple of different ways that we look to people as donors, both as private investors as well as donors to our resident services program.
Could you repeat that again about how what did you say you sell the tax credit to the investors?
Private investors.
Okay.
Yep. And those investors get the tax credit, and then they get the depreciation value over the life of the building, and then they also get the nonprofit tax value, credit on their taxes. A lot of corporations will be an investor. private corporations and individuals. We typically get those investors through private investment firms and so forth. Now, we are interested in talking to groups or individuals who may be interested in being a private investor in a project, because what we are seeing is there are places where we want to build, but we can't get tax credit for that location. The tax credit program requires specific needs and desires in terms of being eligible. You have to be on a, near a hospital, you need near food, you need to be near transportation, and all these points that you have to get in order to be eligible for tax credit awards. So, but we know that there are parts in the community, especially in rural areas like small towns like Franklin or Tip City or some of those areas, where we could build 10 units of housing and help the seniors that live in those rural communities with affordable housing, but we could never get tax credits in that area. They just don't get awarded in those parts. But and one of the things that we like to think about too is that if you live in a rural community, are you going to want to leave your hometown to live in Dayton, Ohio, when you live way out in, Cedarville, for instance? So we are talking to people and saying, hey, as a donor, a major gift donor, if you would like to donate $1 million, we can build 10 units of housing in an area where we have seniors who could really use housing, and with funding that's a private investment for you, as if you're looking. So there's lots of ways we look at how donors get involved, but more importantly, we look at donors for this resident services program because it's new. We're trying to figure out how to fund this program through donations and to keep our seniors living in our properties as long as they possibly can. So I'm just going to stop talking and take a bite of my soup